have roll call, please?
Commissioner Goldman,
Here.
Commissioner Whiten,
Here.
Commissioner Dubin,
Here.
Chair Sadler.
Here. And just noting that Commissioner Kellenberg is absent for tonight's meeting. Before we move on to other items, there's a period for public communications at the beginning of our meeting. That's where any member of the public can come up and speak to the Planning Commission on any item under the Planning Commission's general jurisdiction, but not on tonight's agenda. Would anybody like to make any public comments tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public communications. And we have no items on the consent calendar tonight, so we'll move on to our public hearings. Our first public hearing tonight will be item 5.1, and that is a request for a sign permit by Better Buzz Coffee at 280 South Coast Highway. And Sarah Olson, our planning technician, will be providing us with the staff report tonight. Are there any commissioner disclosures on this item? None here either. Okay. Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Planning Commissioners. Item 5.1 is request for approval of a sign permit for Better Buzz Coffee. The project is located at 280 South Coast Highway in the Visitor Commercial District of the Downtown Specific Plan area, and the subject suite contains approximately 29 linear feet of street frontage along South Coast Highway. Better Buzz Coffee was approved by the Planning Commission on September 18th, 2024 for design review and a conditional use permit, and the initial sign application was continued to a date uncertain. The City Council requested review of the approval on November 12th, 2024, and upheld the approval with more restrictive conditions regarding the street-facing facade design. Since the City Council approval, a permit has been issued for interior demo and is in process with the Building Division to begin the exterior and interior improvements. The previous sign permit application included an approximately 22 square foot illuminated wall sign and an approximately 8 square foot illuminated blade sign. The wall sign was proposed to exceed the maximum allowance of 15 square feet in the downtown and was to be constructed of flat cut acrylic lettering. The applicant was given direction from the commission to bring the blade sign under the canopy and to reduce the sign area to comply with city standards. The proposed sign permit application before you is one illuminated canopy sign and one suspended sign. The proposed canopy sign will be 14.5 square feet with a maximum letter height of 17.5 inches. The sign will be constructed of black painted aluminum, and the letters will be mounted to an aluminum frame that will support the gooseneck lamp lighting. The proposed lighting will be approximately 2700 Kelvin, which is on the warmer end of the Kelvin scale. The suspended sign will be located under the canopy and be approximately 7 square feet with a letter height of 4 inches and will also be constructed of painted aluminum. Both the canopy sign and suspended signs comply with the Downtown Specific Plan and municipal code requirements, and staff recommends that the Planning Commission by motion adopt the attached resolution approving the sign permit and finding said action exempt from CEQA.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any commissioner questions of staff at this point?
I have just a quick one. Excuse me. In regards to the CEQA Class 1 exemption, are you considering this a minor alteration as it applies exclusively to the sign or to the facade itself?
It's a minor alteration to an existing building, but the Class 15311 is for accessory structures like a sign on a building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, to the applicant.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Sarah, for all your help so far and a great introduction. I'm Anders Lassiter, architect for the project. I don't really have much to add other than a request to the Commissioners regarding the gooseneck lamp, if it would be possible to consider as a potential alternative, yet to be decided, if they could also consider a straight armed lamp rather than a gooseneck. We've got a gooseneck shown on the renders now, and I know that's tends to be a more traditional approach to a sign like this, but something we wanted to consider was, could we have the alternative for a straight armed neck for the lamp should we choose. So I'd like to ask if the commissioners could give us that approval as an alternative to be determined by the applicant.
Can I ask you a question? Anders, so if you were to do that, and I'm looking at the proposed front South Coast Highway elevation right now for the proposal, you've got this frame with these gooseneck things coming off of it. Would you still have the frame and then just have these straight arms coming off of the frame? That the arms would not go all the way back to the building?
Correct. It would be exactly as rendered, just instead of the gooseneck, it would be a short but straight arm. That's all.
Okay, and is that frame going to be self-supporting like that? Is it going to require any kind of diagonal bracing or anything going back to the,
It shows that on the plan.
does it?
There's a diagonal behind. Somewhere I saw it from a,
Okay, so there is some additional bracing for that whole frame.
Yes,
Okay.
and we've got our sign contractor here tonight if we need to speak to her about the attachment mechanism. But yeah, the idea would be that that frame would support yeah, there you go.
Okay.
That
so
the frame would support the letters and the lighting up above. And in that profile where you see the gooseneck, you could imagine that just being a straight line and having a fixture that simply points down, a la the ones that Sarah had shared. So our request tonight is simply that this could be an alternative if they chose to use this instead of a gooseneck, if you'd consider it.
And what was your reasoning for wanting that alternative?
Just simply to give the applicant the opportunity to consider whether a more traditional curved form or maybe something more contemporary that's in line with the rest of the building's aesthetic and their brand.
Okay,
Anders, on the previous submittal, there was a blade sign, which was above the canopy on the wall. I mean, all of that is out the window. But
Correct.
now we have the suspended sign below the canopy. Did you consider rotating the suspended signs 90 degrees so it would be visible from the sidewalk? And it
No,
would act more as a blade sign for pedestrians because right now it doesn't.
no, and I think that's because as it's considered now, that blade sign underneath the canopy is really a part of an overall composition for Better Buzz Coffee Roasters. I would say it's one sign that spans between the upper and lower part of that canopy, and it's not two individual signs where the blade sign might be its own object, turned 90 degrees and oriented to the sidewalk. This is intended to be a unified singular composition.
Is there a place to put a very minimalist blade sign? I mean, because there's no indication on the street, as you're walking
Yeah.
along the north side of
Well,
Coast Highway.
to be frank, we wanted to make sure we were under the size that we were allowed, which is we're at 14 and a half square feet. The 15 is the maximum with the sign that we've got, because I know that the commissioners had a lot of concern about the amount of area with the last sign. So Sarah, maybe you could clarify, but if we added a blade sign, does that add to the square footage?
A blade sign does not count toward the total computable area.
It does not count. So in other words, a blade sign could be added.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anders, in regards to the finish, do you guys have any concerns about paint versus powder coating in that environment
this is,
since it's so close to the
going parallel
ocean?
with the sidewalk?
They would
When
be
you're
powder
walking along the
coated
sidewalk, it's not
metal.
in your face.
Oh, because it said painted. It's-
Yeah, I think painted with powder coating, but we could certainly put that in as a restriction if the
No,
commission.
no, I was just curious because I know some people say, the paints that are used on aluminum signage is so good these days that it's not that big a deal in a corrosive environment like, where you guys are. So I was wondering,
Yeah, typically it's either powder coated or like a Kynar finish, which is a really high-end
Right.
quality paint finish.
Okay, so there's no concern there.
No,
Okay, thanks.
These letters don't seem particularly large. Do you know, for example, how large the Finney's letters are?
no.
I think they're.
Maybe staff could help with that,
Yeah.
but no,
Sarah, do you know that?
Not off the top of my head, but I could get back to you on that.
Oh, it's okay. I think they're substantially larger,
Hmm.
but.
Did they
it's-
get approval for more square footage than 15?
No. Well, no, I mean, we didn't get give a variance or anything. So, okay, thank you.
Okay. You have anything else to add?
No, I guess just asking for clarification as to whether or not commissioners are requesting that we add a blade sign underneath the canopy. I wasn't clear on that request.
Are you open to it? I mean, we can discuss it and then open the public hearing again and have your comment.
I mean, we're open to it if that.
Here, come on up.
Get in on the party.
Give your name and tell them.
Hi, Corey Becker. I'm the Director of Construction for Better Buzz, and I've been working on this project for about a year and a half now, up to this point. So, in regards to the additional Blaine sign, we would be open to it as long as, we could maybe get the sidewalk traffic visible entity. And I do want to also, he did point out that the coffee roasters is a part of a bigger sign above, so those two tie together
Mhm.
on our traditional branding. So if we did have something, sure.
Apply for a blade sign, it likely could be approved and processed at a staff level. It should qualify for an administrative sign permit.
I wasn't thinking about it on the building, but rather just a very minimalist sign that would be either on that pillar to the right of the canopy, or
Kind of on that brown column there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
not anything. I mean, it would be terrific if it could just be a suspended sign under the canopy in the other direction.
Yeah, something I'm thinking about is that because the composition of the Better Buzz, the frame, the lights, the coffee roasters suspended above the canopy and the canopy itself are intended to be kind of a
Unit.
unit,
Mm.
introducing another thing perpendicular to it that would be a complete sign in the sense that it would say Better Buzz Coffee Roasters or something to that extent, would begin to, in a way, conflict with that. So perhaps the blade sign could find its home at the opposite end of the canopy, for
That's
instance.
what I was going to suggest
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. Great minds think alike, George. Thank you.
Hardly.
Or it could even just say coffee,
It could even just say coffee. That's a great
you know.
suggestion. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
really,
Yeah, I was thinking about this as well, and, because one of the findings is saying that the sign is pedestrian oriented, and by having it, run parallel with the sidewalk, it isn't as much as maybe it could be, but one of the, I don't know if you can answer this, but the front edge of the flat roof extension that comes out that these signs are attached to, if you were to drop a line down from that front edge, how much further out does the sidewalk extend to the curb?
Oh, there's probably another 7 or 8 feet.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the sidewalk's pretty wide there. and
Yes.
So that there is an area where people would be walking out, not underneath that roof, but walking
Correct.
out beyond it and would be able to see it. A pedestrian would be able to see it from that angle.
True.
Okay.
I mean, I think your design is so nice and clean that I hate to see it oversigned, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It gets cluttery.
Yeah, I think that Commissioner Whiten, your suggestion is a really good one, as long as we can find a way to integrate it into the composition and it adds, doesn't detract.
Right.
But perhaps the idea that it is a sign that just speaks to what you can get there and rather than the brand could be a nice way to complement what we've already done.
Right.
So if the commission would be willing to support this approval that we need your approval for tonight, and then we can come back, as Anthony pointed out, for an administrative approval for that blade sign, that would be really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not thinking anything in the same world as the original blade sign,
No,
which is a
we
whole-
burned that. We
a
took that
whole
out.
world unto itself.
We burned that in the
It's gone in
dumpster.
September.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just really minimalist because this is now a very minimalist
yeah,
building
yeah,
and the signage is minimalist.
yeah.
Okay.
Is Better Buzz, the way it's written, is that the logo? Is that what goes on a shirt or a cap? Does the company have a logo?
Yes, we do have a B logo. Do we have that on file? And I was thinking that.
That could
but-
be interesting for the sign.
Well, I was thinking that too, but if Susan said something about maybe just coffee, so you recognize what that is. I mean, I would love just to put the B there. We have done a B blade sign in Arizona before as a requirement.
Or you could have coffee with a B.
Yeah.
Yeah, because really, when I think about when I'm dying for a cup of coffee, it doesn't matter who's selling it. If it says coffee, I'll go.
Yeah.
You know, you just want to know it's there.
So there's the B, and that's really, the whole Better Buzz Coffee Roasters with that B is our total branding. Hopefully someday we'll get big enough like Starbucks where we're just using the B and everybody knows it's Better Buzz, right?
Right.
But for now, this is what we do, and it's worked well for us. And we do different variations of the signage, in our different communities that we're involved with. But back to your question on the blade, would that need to be externally lit as well? Because then if so, then all of a sudden we got another feature down there that
I
starts
don't
to.
think it does, because there's ambient light there. There are lots of cars, and yeah,
No, good.
I
Okay.
wouldn't worry about that lighting.
Okay, well, we could absolutely, I mean, if it's something that they're really passionate about, we can put something together for you as long as we can do it on the staff level and we can get approved today for what we have.
Yeah, I just trying to be very clear, and we'll see if my fellow commissioners support the idea, what it is we're thinking, because we've had apparently some problem with that on other projects. So that the applicant is clear what we're requesting.
How do we feel about the option of the straight arm? I'm fine with
I
it.
was going to
I'm fine
ask,
with it too.
I was
I
going to
was
ask,
actually going to suggest it in my
Yeah,
comment.
well, I was going to ask also, because I know somewhere in the city's material or guidance material or design review guides that it specifically, I think, mentions or suggests gooseneck lamp features. Does staff have an opinion one way or the other between a gooseneck type arm or a straight arm?
No, staff has no strong opinion one way or the other. We have seen straight arm exterior light fixtures installed elsewhere, including in the downtown. The one that comes to mind is the blade sign for Sliced Pizza across the street.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for them? Okay. Any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. We'll go to commissioner comments and discussion. Anybody in particular want to start, Steve?
Wasn't here for the original hearing, so my context isn't full. It's just what was in the report, but I can make the findings. I'm fine with the straight arm and fine with the conversation we've had on the blade sign.
Commissioner Whiten.
Yeah, I think this is a really integrated design. The signage really works with the building, and you've made, from my perspective, a really good improvement to the building. It's got some historicity attached to it, which I think is nice, and yet it's still contemporary. And the signage is complementary. It looks high quality. I think I'd like to see the blade sign perpendicular to the street, and I support the straight arm.
Commissioner Dubin.
Yeah, I can make the findings and support the option of a straight arm or gooseneck, whatever you guys decide. That's about it. I've got no other comment on it, so I'm going to be approving this.
I am as well. Like I said, the only minor thing I was struggling about was, when the staff report was saying that this was pedestrian oriented, it's a little debatable, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with either type of light fixture, and I'm okay with Commissioner Whiten's suggestion about the additional blade sign, and I feel that could be handled administratively. Agree. Can make all the other findings, agree with the CEQA exemption. And, we are also asked, and we haven't really weighed into it, but we are, Planning Commission approval is required for sign letter heights that exceed 8 inches, which they do in this case. But I think there's good justification for it in this case, so I don't have any issue with that, and can make that approval finding as well. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
Yeah, I move that we adopt resolution approving sign permit 24-1639 and finding said action exempt from CEQA, and and also the straight arm versus gooseneck option is up to the applicant,
And the blade sign.
and that the blade sign is optional as well, right?
I like,
Or required.
like a commitment.
Correct. And so Chair, if I may,
Sure.
conditioning the application and approval is kind of tough for a future. Once again, I believe we're all on the same page, but staff doesn't know what's going to come through the door until it comes through the door. So in this instance, I believe we've had some affirmation from the applicant, but trying to work that as a condition is really, I don't want to say impossible, but very difficult, because if it says you cannot have this until you get an administratively approved blade sign, and then they show up with something that may not be, and I'm not saying you guys would. And so, I think trying to
Keep the
work that,
blade sign out.
trying to work that condition could be very, very difficult.
So your suggestion is that we do not add that as a condition?
That would be
of
my
approval?
advice, Mr. Chair, yes.
I'm
But the
okay.
option of the straight versus gooseneck is okay, yes.
Well, I believe that because as of right now, the gooseneck is on the plans,
Right.
correct? And so, yes, that we would need that
Okay.
direction from the commission to say the applicant has the option.
Would you like me to restate the motion?
I'm good with it. Planning Manager Viera, you good? Yep.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman,
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten.
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin.
Yes.
Chair Sadler.
Yes. All right, motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Kellenberg being absent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll be moving on to our next item, 5.2, which is a design review request and CEQA exemption for Forest Avenue Mall at 332 and 334 Forest Avenue. And once again, Sarah Olson will be providing us with the staff report tonight.
Okay, item 5.2 is request for design review approval for the Forest Avenue Mall. The project site is located in the resident serving and downtown commercial land use districts of the downtown specific plan, with street frontage on both Forest Avenue and Ocean Avenue. The site is developed with a 3-story mixed-use commercial building and a 19-stall parking garage at the street level. On June 5th, 2024, the Planning Commission approved a prior design review application to modify the exterior color palette from a medium gray to a monochromatic charcoal gray. The renderings provided in the application to staff showed the brick adjacent to the parking garage painted to be consistent with the rest of the building. Staff's evaluation found that the monochromatic color scheme was appropriate and consistent with the design review criteria because of the building's unique architectural forms and various materials and textures. At the time of the hearing, public opposition was received regarding the dark color and the painting of the brick. At the same time, the applicant presented an alternative design which showed the brick unpainted. The Planning Commission considered the public comments and the alternative design and ultimately approved the project subject to the conditions that the brick adjacent to the parking garage remain unpainted, the trim color be a darker shade than the rest of the building, and that the applicant consider a possible lighter color than the proposed Iron River. On December 4th, 2024, a code enforcement case was opened based on a complaint for violating conditions 13 and 14. The applicant is proposing to amend the prior conditions of approval to paint the brick and to not incorporate a darker trim color. After staff conducted a site visit, it was observed that the proposed color has more of a green undertone versus a dark charcoal gray that was shown in the prior renderings. The glossy finish of the paint highlights the variation in the materials on the building, including the pores of the brick. The shadows from the various angles and geometry of the building create the illusion of a darker trim color, where the flat wall surfaces tend to appear lighter when viewed in natural lighting. Since the publication of the staff report, staff has received one public comment in opposition to the dark color scheme and painting of the brick. Overall, staff finds that the proposed design is consistent with the design review criteria as discussed in the staff report. However, staff recommends that the Planning Commission weigh the evidence by considering the information in the staff report, the application materials, any testimony provided at or prior to the public hearing, and its own analysis of the required findings. If the Planning Commission agrees with staff's analysis, the Commission may by motion adopt the attached resolution approving design review and finding said action exempt from CEQA.
Thank you, Sarah. I forgot to ask, are there any disclosures on this item for any commissioners? No. Are there any questions for staff at this point?
Sarah, since there was a code enforcement issue, has there been any issuance of any fines to the applicant for not following the planning commission's condition of approval?
I believe at this point, because code enforcement action is progressive, we've provided written notice that the applicant is not currently in compliance and is violating prior conditions of approval. That has not escalated to the issuance of fines, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? It's kind of a broad question for Anthony, but it's sort of like, how do we get here to this point on a staff level? I mean, the planning commission, made an approval, a conditional approval. There's a resolution that has conditions of approval that aren't followed by the applicant. And is this I know it's happened more than once, but is it a typical occurrence? And is it staff's position to accept a new application, basically a second bite at the apple,
Thanks for that question, Chair. The code does allow for applicants to reapply for a denied project. Now, it's not exactly what happened here. It was a conditional approval, and the applicant is requesting essentially that the Planning Commission lift or remove those prior conditions of approval. So somewhat similar situation. I don't know that the Planning Commission has adjudicated this specific situation before, but to give the applicant their due process, they were given two options to select from. They could either repaint the building in accordance with the Planning Commission's approval, or they can return to the Planning Commission to seek approval of this modified scheme. And it's really up to the Planning Commission to weigh the evidence this evening, as Planning Technician Sarah Olson mentioned, and render a decision.
I thought the process was if the applicant didn't agree with our resolution, but indeed the applicant in the meeting did agree with our resolution. I went back and watched the whole tape. And I thought, well, maybe Chair Sadler didn't mention the right of appeal. Oh, yes, he did. So as I understand it, the process is if you disagree with our decision, you appeal to City Council. Isn't that the process?
That is the process, and that's a good clarification. Based on the application that was submitted and attached to this staff report, the applicant could confirm this, but my understanding was that as they started repainting the building, the decision was made in the field at that time, presumably after the appeal period had lapsed, that, oh, we actually want to do something different. That was my impression when I read through the application, but the applicant could clarify what the thought process was. But you're absolutely right. The expectation is that an applicant, if they disagree with the Planning Commission's decision, and that includes conditions of approval, they have that 14-day right of appeal to the City Council.
And now that we're at this point, there's no possibility of them bypassing the Planning Commission at this point and going directly to the City Council and saying, we want to appeal. Yes, we got our approval. And yes, we didn't follow these two conditions. And now we want to appeal the Planning Commission's approval, and we want the City Council to remove those conditions.
They would only be able to appeal to the City Council during the designated appeal period.
Well, would they be able to appeal our decision tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, I understand that. Yep.
And then Chair, if I may just add, of course, Planning Manager Vieira, said exactly the right thing. Staff, when they receive an application, it's, unless it's incomplete, unless there's something wrong on its face, they don't really have much in the way of discretion to say, hey, what you guys should have done is appealed to NMLS, they should have. And so in that instance, you know, it's kind of more of a due process. Hey, if someone submits an application, it is incumbent on staff to bring it to you all, irrespective of kind of the unique and wonky way at which we got here.
So do you think that this is something that might rise to the level of a discussion about how to change the process if this situation arises again? So for example, I'm shocked that there are no fines for this.
Well, sure. And so I can kind of speak to that as well. The city's, as Planning Manager Vieira said, the city's code enforcement is kind of progressive. Our goal is, you know, compliance. Now, once again, this scenario is a bit atypical. I would grant you that, but typically our first move is not to hammer someone with fines. If we provide someone, say, hey, you're potentially in violation, and they say, don't worry, my application is going to be, on your desk tomorrow. That's typically not good enough, but that's typically a good response. Hey, perfect. Okay, we'll kind of get it figured out. As I said, this situation is a bit atypical due to the condensed time frame. This isn't like the entitlement was given 10 years ago and the new owner comes in and says, hey, I'm going to change it up. And now all of a sudden, hey, oh, I didn't know, or something like that. But that's really, trying to carve out policy and special circumstances just for these one-offs is not impossible, but difficult, because typically the idea that code enforcement its main goal is compliance is pretty consistent, throughout the state.
I've got one more staff question then. Because this took staff time and obviously cost the city something, right? It's, how do we get compensated for that time and expense?
Exactly.
Sure. The city did not waive any application fees. They did need to pay for a design review application. And so that is the city's cost recovery.
Okay. Again, it seems like there's so many other important things going on in the city to have to, go through something like this. Just, it doesn't sit too well. I guess that's a comment. Sorry.
We're questions now.
Yes.
Anyway, so I think we're done with our questions. So to the applicant team, if you'll have 5 minutes, give us your name and let us know about your application. I think you got to push a button on that thing.
My name's Dan DeClark, and I'm the owner of the project. And first of all, we'd like to apologize for the confusion, because Bob, who's been in our building for 22 years, is an architect, and I've really leaned on him, asking him for help with my goal of trying to make it the nicest project in downtown Laguna Beach and stay within the theme of keeping it small and boutique and everything. So Bob's the one who helped us pick color, design, everything. And he happened to be out of town when I came in for the approval on the paint, which took us a while to get approval on that. But after we got approval and I was here, Bob was out of town. And so I was just kind of like, it's taken us almost a year to get paint approval. Let's just go for it. And so I think that what was submitted was kind of unjust and in a hurry coming in. And I think all along, Bob had suggested that brick be painted and the building be one tone. And I'll hand it off to Bob to give his reasons why, where the mix-up was in the first approval, and then how we ended up where we're at today. So, Bob?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob White. First of all, Sarah, your staff report was fantastic. All the bullet points that were concerns of mine based on the meeting that I wasn't able to attend, I think Sarah did a terrific job of clarifying. Certainly our follow-up that we made when we resubmitted was an attempt to share with the commission the thought evolution that we went through. I think where some of the misinterpretation occurred in the June meeting, as Dan referred to, there was a bunch of graphics that were submitted, including a color board. I think everybody in the group came out, looked at the color in person. And there was a mix up in the graphics. There was a a graphic that was referring to a green tone with a darker trim. In that graphic, the brick was unpainted. And then there were other graphics that showed everything being the same tone. So that's where the confusion occurred. I watched it on tape. Susan, as you mentioned, I watched it on tape shortly after the meeting occurred. And I felt terrible for Dan, who's been my landlord for 22 years, where I felt like he was kind of stranded out on an island fielding these comments and suggestions that you folks were making without me there to say, Dan, this was the intent. So I think to get down to the point, and it sounds, I mean, it's actually, well, our idea was to repaint the color, which we got approval from. I think everybody was supportive of the color in general. In the conversation that occurred in the June meeting, somebody suggested, what if there was a contrasting trim? My own research back when we were proposing the color originally is, I talked to Greg Abel about it. His father was the architect. Greg remembers as a young guy working in the office and that this building was always one color. When I looked at it just from a professional standpoint, I could tell that the building was never designed to be a two-tone building. It's just the way the siding, the stucco, the trim, the bridging, detailing, it's basically all post and beam. I can't imagine that Chris Abel back in the day would have ever expected it to be two-tone, because if you look at, did you folks get a chance to go walk the property? So you can see with what Sarah referred to as the barn-shaped forms, there's just a lot of geometries happening in a pretty tight space. So the idea of accentuating all those geometries, I think, was, pretty chaotic. So when Greg confirmed my own intuition that it was an all cedar building at one time, or maybe it was Doug fir, I think it was on, one color. Over time, because it's been almost 60 years, 50 something years, obviously it's been painted and repainted many times. And ultimately, when I moved in 22 years ago, it was kind of this battleship gray with a dark trim. So
You keep going.
So I was thrilled when Dan came to me as his favorite tenant and said, will you help me come up with some colors? Now, full disclosure, I've spent my career designing private residences all over the country, and commercial is not my thing. But I think Dan trusted my eye and said, I'm ready to spend some money. And just as he shared with you folks, he wanted to make this the best building downtown. I think we all agree that downtown has, kind of been,
You have
Keep going.
additional time, yes.
it's kind of been falling apart before our eyes. And here Dan comes to me and he's going to re-landscape everything. He's going to re-roof. He's going to use copper flashing. He's going to repaint the building, obviously making a significant personal investment in a building that I get to spend my days in, which is great. But I love this sort of Renaissance idea of we're going to sort of bring this tired building that's falling apart back to life. And, we started this process a year and a half ago, just to paint. So I think two important points. Our response from the Planning Commission meeting was, we got to paint the building first. So we're going to paint it all one color. And then my advice to Dan was, let's see if we need that second color. Even though, again, my professional opinion was that it was never a two-tone, originally designed to be two-tone. Once we got it painted all one color, it was clear, just as Sarah's report emphasized, there's so many things happening of interest that from sun to shade to shadow to texture, the different types of texture on the wood, there's already plenty going on that it didn't need a second color. So my suggestion to Dan was, I think we should let it be. Now, I made the call on the brick when the painters were there, because again, in my mind, it was never intended to be red brick. Now, what the
But
group...
it always was.
It always was, but what the group wasn't privy to, I think, graphically, is that it's the only spot on the building that has it, and it's just a thin veneer brick. There's some images in the report that show the corner, call it coming down Ocean or coming up Ocean, where it's literally just a thin brick applied to the building. There's no structural integrity to it. And in the renderings, it really shows, if you look at the before and after, there is a photoshopped version that we generated initially where the building was basically all green and the brick was red. As soon as we had it painted, it jumped out to me as the brick in red was absolutely the wrong piece to be there. It almost accentuated the fact that it didn't belong. So when the painters were there, I made the call that it was the right thing to do. Honestly, not thinking anything about the ramifications that you're raising tonight, that it would really be frowned upon and things like penalties and so on. I just looked at it and said, it's the right decision. And I think, George, you're a regular at Zinc. Hopefully you would admit that what we've done there as you look across from the patio, from the building on the left to the building on the right, I mean, it's dramatically improved. And I can also say that my clients that come from around the world to come visit me in my studio, as well as all of our tenants, I mean, we get so many terrific compliments of how good it feels, how relevant it feels, how updated it feels. Our tenants are buzzed about it. I think several of them have kind of redone their interiors because they're excited about it. So, I'm disappointed that this has turned into such a negative thing when what we thought we had intended, or, our intention was to do something really special downtown. And it's, Dan's capital and his personal investment to bring it to life. I'm proud of aesthetically what it looks like. My whole studio is across the top floor, and it's my home away from home, and I couldn't be more proud.
Okay, I get it. I mean, I gave you a lot of extra time to
You
try to
did.
explain.
Thank you.
Explain, why you guys did what you did. The question I would have was, knowing, it took you a year and a half to get approval to do this painting, and that nothing, is particularly easy here in this city, to think that, I mean, what were you thinking? Were you thinking that this was just not going to be noticed, and that you were going to be able to just kind of let, a couple of conditions that the Planning Commission made as part of their approval would be unnoticed?
Well, to answer that, I honestly thought that people would just look at it and appreciate how beautiful it became. And it wouldn't be frowned upon that it varied from
all our time and analysis and thinking and discussion and going through a meeting and discussing it amongst ourselves, discussing it with you, at the applicant, coming up with specific conditions of approval to approve this application, and then to think that those weren't important, or that we didn't,
no,
that we were wrong, and that we were, it's frustrating for a member of the Planning Commission to feel as though we were just being disrespected in this way.
Well, I don't look at it that way. I'm sorry you do. Really what it boils down to is the second color, which would have been a Seclin application, we didn't put on. Now, there's certainly an option to do that. I don't think it's the right choice for the building, and I think, the staff report supports that. It wouldn't be the right decision. Certainly having Greg Abel's endorsement that it was all one color at one time just sort of validates that. So I think what it really boils down to is.
But it wasn't, the brick was never painted.
Correct.
Right. So
I'm just
you
talking about
keep
the body
saying-
of the
you
building.
keep saying it was all one color. It never was.
Well, you're right. All the wood trim, the post and beam, the siding, et cetera.
And I don't want to drift into comments really yet, but without just a little bit, just saying, if, we'll have a discussion here amongst ourselves about this, but if we were to hold you to the original approval, we're not talking about having to repaint the whole building. We're saying, right, you'll have to paint the trim a different color, which could be painted a different color over the existing color, right? So repainting the trim and stripping the paint off of the brick.
Right.
So, it is possible to do that. And so, I don't know, with that said, I'll any other questions?
Yeah.
Applicant?
Yeah, I do. My concern is, when I went back and looked at the tape, there were very direct questions about the brick, very direct. And there was confusion about the renderings, absolutely. But the applicant said, no, the proposal is to keep the brick. And then I believe it was Chair Sadler who said, one of us said, are you confirming that you're keeping the brick? And the answer was yes. It wasn't a condition that was applied at the end of the meeting before this very tedious discussion about the brick. And so I cannot understand why there would be any confusion about that.
Well,
And you said that you yourself had looked at the tape. How could you miss that? I mean, that's the thing I can't, it's very, to sort of, pick up on what Chair Sadler is saying, that's the thing that is a little disingenuous.
Yeah, well, I
I
apologize
mean, you may
for that.
prefer it, design is very subjective. That's absolutely your prerogative to truly believe that's the right decision. But that is not what the applicant committed to after a very detailed and exchange. I think twice it was confirmed by the applicant.
Yeah, and I clearly made a design decision that I thought was the right thing for the building. The other important thing to note is, and it shows up in some of the pictures, when the original building was gray and the brick was red, it kind of seamlessly blended together on that corner. So the fact that it was just an applied veneer wasn't as, it didn't read as strong as when we then painted the approved color, the green, and then you looked at it again from Ocean Avenue or like from the zinc side. And it really just did appear like wallpaper. And again, the painters were there and I thought it was the right decision. I'm used to making decisions on the fly, important decisions all the time. And
Do you work in Laguna Beach? It doesn't sound like you've done
that's
a lot
a
of
whole other
projects here.
discussion. Like I said, I've been here for 22 years. I live in Woods Cove, but my work takes me
Yes, exactly.
to other places.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're right. I sit at the zinc with some frequency. I was the one who pointed out that the brick got painted to Anthony. And from the time in June when you got the approvals with those conditions, I mean, it was months before you got around to painting the building. And if you were going to make a design change, why didn't you come back and at least potentially have it done administratively or come back to another meeting like this before you just went ahead and did it?
Well, honestly, it was when we were painting the building. So we had going through the process.
But you could have stopped with the brick and come back and said, we really want to paint the brick and get approval for that instead of just doing it.
We could have. You're right. You're right. Given
I don't understand why you didn't.
Well, I mean, honestly, George, we applied for the original color in October of 2023 with color boards, renderings. Dan's got all the correspondence, but I think it was May and we still hadn't heard anything back. Emails going back and forth. We just wanted to paint the building. And
That wasn't
I
because
think
of
we're
us.
drifting
I know,
away
but I'm
from-
just, I'm illustrating I'm illustrating a point. So
Okay. All right.
So we
Now,
had-
I think right now we're getting more into your attempted justification for what you did. And we've heard it and we understand it and you're kind of being repetitive now. So, and we were just supposed to be asking questions. So I think we've got our questions answered. And so now I'll open it to public comments. Do any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none. Okay.
And so Chair, and once again, of course, I let the discussion go. I just want to remind the Planning Commission that, of course, that, justification, as you said, is entirely fine to be heard, but the application before you needs to be judged based off of its merits, irrespective of the potential wrongdoing that the Planning Commission may feel. Rather, it is simply whatever the application is before you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Just trying to get a better handle on
Totally understand.
why
Yeah.
these things
Yep,
happen.
Yep, totally. Yep.
Okay, so I will close the public hearing and we will go to Planning Commission discussion and decision. Anybody in particular like to start? Mr. Goldman.
I'm a regular at Zinc as well. I remember Saturday I was sitting with my wife. I looked up and it's like, wow, that's not what we talked about. In any rate, to Patrick's comment, I cannot approve this on the merits and do not support the application.
Commissioner Dubin.
it's one of those situations that you put us in that, we made a very clear condition of approval back in June of 24, regardless of whether it took you, a year or a year and a half to get there. That's because our processes are problematic, and that's a whole different conversation, and I'm not going to get into that, but I'm not the kind of person who likes to be punitive to anybody, but we're starting to have a number of these after the fact reapplications because of something that wasn't followed during the approval process, and it's really frustrating for us because now staff has had to spend time on this. We're into another meeting to discuss this again after there was very, very clear conditions of approval back in June of 24, and it just regardless of the aesthetic, whether I think it looks better or worse or indifferent, it's not really the issue for me. I've thought about this since I saw this reapplication, and I thought, yeah, am I going to fall on my sword over this or whatever? But it's just the fact that you completely ignored what we wanted you to do, and you could have come back at any time after the June meeting and either reapplied or to see if you could get that changed, which you didn't do. You just went ahead and did it. And it isn't a very public viewed area. And regardless of whether was an applied brick or a structural element is really not relevant to me. So I just feel like, you're going to have to appeal this to city council because I can't approve it either.
Commissioner Whiten.
I went back and, we all are in that neighborhood all the time. And I think it's an overall really positive improvement on the building. The building is very imperfect. It's kind of like a tree house, that was built over time. And even with the paint, you can see the imperfections of the wood and the joinery. The whole thing is, it's interesting to look at because it's so imperfect. And when I went back with the mindset of the trim, trying to be open-minded for this reapplication, and I looked at the trim, as you said, the trim is all over the place. How do you define what the trim is? So some of the windows facing, and you can see it on these photographs, are really, they're 12-inch or 15-inch pieces of wood, and then joined to like 6-inch, and there's every possible shape, every possible size. And then as you move around the building, the ratio of trim to window changes too. There's more trim than window. And then when I looked at the parking lot elevation, you look at it and you think, what's this going to look like? Because there's a lot of trim over on that side. So there's going to be building wall, window, and trim facing, and then the podium, the base. So my feeling about the trim is I'd rather not see. I don't want to be reminded of the trim. Trim is not a thing of great beauty. There's no consistency. If the whole thing had been stripped down to, wood, if the whole building had been sandblasted or something, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But so I'm open-minded about the trim, meaning I definitely wouldn't fall on my sword for the trim. I think it might just make the whole situation worse. But I will draw the line on the brick. The brick was the only vestige of what the original Chris Abel building was. The applicant clearly stated and restated under questioning that the brick would stay. And design is a very subjective thing. And when I look at the rendering that shows the new color with the brick, I like it. I don't think it's too contrasty. And what I also just like about the brick, separate from the building, is that on a street that is very sterile, is a very mostly sterile, that side of the street that block is a very sterile walking environment, except up at the end with the gallery and the house. Then you come, you come to cars, tuck under parking, then you come to parking, and then you come to your building with tuck under parking. That's a wasteland for pedestrians, right? And what the brick does is provide texture. And it is a Laguna material. You see it in the paving and so forth. So it's original. The applicant committed to it, and I think it adds to an otherwise kind of bleak street condition. So I can let the trim go, but I can't let the brick. I want the paint off the brick, and not just there, but there's another pillar to the right by the stairs. This brick also. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Commissioner Dubin in that I get no pleasure out of giving you guys a hard time about how this came to be. And I'm not out to punish people unreasonably, but again, I feel as though it is, it's frustrating for us, and I do feel it's disrespectful to the Planning Commission and in our whole process. Went back and I read through our minutes and looked at some of the meeting from before, and we were pretty clear about it. We're very clear, and I made the comment that I thought the brick should remain unpainted. If we had further discussion at the meeting then, and there had been a push to say no, we really want to paint the brick, then maybe we would have made some other comments like, well, then just remove the brick or something. Maybe that would have been an option. But again, here we're talking about a building that was designed by Chris Abel, a locally recognized important architect in our town. For whatever reason, even though it only occurs in that portion of the building, he decided to have unpainted brick, in those areas. And I would disagree. It's not a thin veneer. I mean, they make some really thin, artificial brick veneer that you could slap on a wall that's a half-inch thick. This looked to me more like it's half brick. It's not full bricks. Yes, it's probably not part of the structural system for the building. It is applied as a exterior wall material, but there it was, and when we made a big deal about it and it was agreed upon, and so I have to look at the application as it is before us here tonight. And you're basically asking, to not do these two conditions, the trim and the brick. And I agree with Commissioner Whiten. I don't feel as though the trim color difference is as important, but I feel as though that brick was to remain unpainted and should be returned to that. So I don't know if the other commissioners want to discuss that, whether or not, that makes a difference regarding the trim. If you guys feel as though,
I don't care about the trim. That could,
Yeah, most of our conversation was the brick, and I remember, Dan, you saying that Bob wasn't able there, and you were able to be at the meeting, and you referred to him. I do think, had you been at the meeting, we would have gotten to the same place on the brick, as we're getting to tonight. So I'm fine.
Chair, I'll reopen the public hearing.
Aside from the principle that you had asked for it to be unpainted, and now kind of holding your ground, do you collectively agree that the building is more attractive, which is also part of the responsibility of your group, right? Is it a more attractive building with unpainted brick versus?
That's not what we're being asked to
Is that a
decide
design
here
review
tonight.
question?
That's not what's before us. So it doesn't really matter. I mean,
Correct. Yeah, there's specific design review criteria and findings that have to be made. The attractiveness is not one of them. Do you find this more or less attractive based off of design feature A or design feature B?
yeah. So you can ask. It sounds as though that the commission is in agreement that we're okay with everything you've done except for the painting of the brick. So we can have a vote on it about it tonight. You can, which we could approve it in such a way that we would approve everything except for make it a condition of the approval that you're going to have to remove the paint from the brick. Or you could ask for us just to vote on what you've presented here tonight, in which case it would be a denial, and then you could appeal it to the city council.
And so Chair, if I may, just for the applicant's edification. So the chair laid it out well. Those kind of the two options as I'm getting. And just to be sure, you can appeal either one of those decisions. So even if you guys get an approval, you can still then appeal the approval without the, with the condition that you remove the paint from the brick. So it's not like you have to take that and then you waive your rights to appeal to the city council.
Are you guys clear on that? Okay, so it sounds like
And so Chair, unless-
probably the smartest thing for us to do is just to go ahead and vote on it, make it a condition of approval that they remove
Correct,
the paint
exactly.
from the brick. And
Right. And so unless, I do believe that there may be some, actually, never mind, Chair. You're 100% right. That's the best course of action.
Okay, if somebody would like to make a motion to that effect?
We move to adopt the resolution approving design review 25-0697 with the condition that the paint be removed from the brick on both corners of the ground floor of the building at the sidewalk, and find said action exempt from CEQA.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chair, if I may, I just want to make sure.
Okay,
Go ahead.
And just to clarify, this is a conditional approval. You are denying the applicant's request to leave the brick in its existing condition, the painted condition. So that paint would be stripped. But just to make it abundantly clear, the Planning Commission is granting the applicant's request to omit a trim color from the wood elements of the building.
Do we need to add that to the
I- or-
condition?
or
You can
which
simply
condition
say-
was that? There was 13 and 14, and which one was which?
Yeah, give us one second here, Chair.
Condition 13 on the prior resolution was to leave the brick unpainted, and condition 14 was for the trim color.
Okay. So to amend the,
It would be amend the motion to include that condition to leave the brick unpainted.
amending
yeah,
the motion to remove condition 14, that the trim color be a darker shade than the rest of the building, and retain condition 13, the brick adjacent to the parking garage remain unpainted.
In this instance, i.e., if approved, they would need to remove the paint that currently exists in the built environment, but we will figure that out in the
Yes,
resolution.
in plain English, remove the paint from the brick.
Is there a second?
A second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman,
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten.
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin.
Yes.
Chair Sadler.
Yes, and there's a 14-day right of appeal to the city council if you don't agree with that decision.
Mm.
Thank you.
And once again, just for that 14-day starts right now from tonight. The resolution will be drafted and amended by staff in the next couple days, but the appeal starts tonight. So, go ahead.
It's an excellent question. The code enforcement case is currently open. If the planning commission wants to provide some direction to staff that we can communicate to code enforcement and perhaps get some input from the applicant on what they believe their contractor can do in terms of to implement that condition of approval, we can receive that information and do any necessary code enforcement follow-up. So you may want to incorporate that into your motion as a.
Yeah, so I don't think we need it in necessarily the resolution. Probably, the answer is going to depend on if you guys appeal or not. If you're not going to appeal, then the code enforcement process will continue. And if that's a direction, code enforcement staff will be in contact, and we will get you that answer.
Yeah, I just would,
I understand. Yeah. Totally appreciate the question, sir. And code enforcement staff will get in touch and give you the required deadline from the city.
Yeah, so if staff could communicate with code enforcement, letting them know about tonight's decision and the implications of that, which is basically remove the paint from the brick, and they realize that the trim's okay, and then just follow up and do it as quickly as possible. I mean, we'd like to see it done, as quickly as possible.
I just have to find a contractor to come out. I think it would require sandblasting.
Right, it totally, as long as you are in open lines of communication with city staff, progressing, we can work with you.
Yeah, I'm
That's
a
probably
little
not the
concerned
best way
about
to do it.
sandblasting because that's going to change the
Right,
brick itself.
so hang on,
Nobody does that anymore.
we understand. The staff will be sure to effectuate the will of the commission
The one
tonight.
way to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Similar to that iron.
Okay, we're just giving staff a moment to do a changeover. And Anthony, I think you're going to be, okay, so we'll move on to item 5.3, which is a sign permit request and a variance request at the Elisa Creek Shopping Center.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Item number 5.3 is an amendment to the master sign program for the Aliso Creek Plaza Shopping Center. The plaza was developed in the 1980s when the property was under county jurisdiction. So its development predates the annexation of South Laguna into the city. The shopping center is comprised of 17 distinct tenant spaces across 6 parcels. The property is also improved with a large surface parking lot, as well as subterranean parking within the former Gelson's building on the south end of the photo exhibit here on the screen. I did want to point out that the Gelson's building itself is not part of the master sign program, although the parking is shared across the site, and that includes the surface parking lots, all surface parking lots, and the subterranean parking area. The existing master sign program was approved in 2002. As described in the staff report this evening, the proposed amendment would add signage for tenants that are not currently authorized to receive signage. It would also bring certain existing non-conforming signs into conformance with this approval, should you grant it this evening. The sign program sets 3 different standards for the wall sign allowances, essentially varying based on the size of the tenant space, with the larger anchor spaces receiving larger wall signs and smaller signs for some of the more medium and small sized tenant spaces. There is also an allowance for blade signs within the center. The master sign program would allow for and encourage the use of natural materials, specifically aluminum signs and signs fabricated from high density foam, which is a material that can simulate the appearance of a sandblasted wood finish. The sign program would also allow for 2 methods of sign illumination, either halo or external fixtures. And I did want to point out that the freestanding sign, which is pictured on the screen here, is an existing sign that is proposed to remain. The sign permit application does include a request for a variance to exceed the maximum allowable sign area for the site. Signs in the city of Laguna Beach are permitted to occupy an area not to exceed 1 square foot for every linear foot of building street frontage, and capped at a maximum of 150 square feet for the site. Staff does believe the findings can be made to grant the requested variance, with some of the justification being that the commercial center is of an unusually large scale. Commercial properties in the city are generally of a much smaller scale and provide a smaller setback from the parking area and or pedestrian pathway. This property was developed under county jurisdiction and is of a more strip mall style development pattern that's uncharacteristic for Laguna Beach, but is more typical of some of our surrounding suburban cities. The site was also developed across 6 separate parcels. They remain as 6 separate parcels, but they do share reciprocal easement rights to parking and rights for ingress and egress. We did work with the applicant during the application review process to scale down the signage such that the total allowable sign area does not exceed one of the 2 requirements that I had referenced, which is no more sign area than 1 square foot for every linear foot of building frontage. The issue is that the overall cap of 150 square feet really doesn't work for a center of this scale. So staff does find that strict application of the development standards in this case would deprive this applicant of rights that have been afforded to others, and the draft resolution before you this evening does provide draft findings for approval of the variance. And as also indicated in your staff report this evening, staff believes that the findings and design criteria to grant the sign permit application can also be made. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution in your staff report this evening to approve the sign permit and variance applications and find said action exempt from CEQA. That will conclude the staff presentation, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Before we go to that, are there any disclosures on this item? I don't think so. Okay. Anthony, a couple of questions. One being the fact that this center was originally developed when it was under the County of Orange's jurisdiction. Does that in any way grandfather in certain things or items? I mean, was leading to the kind of the question, it was even back when this was originally developed, was, in your opinion, I mean, you probably don't know for a fact, but was the total amount of square footage of signage ever less than 150 square feet?
This would be my best educated guess. I would say no. It likely always exceeded that standard. The first master sign program for the center was approved after the city annexation of South Laguna in 2002. There is a provision in the sign regulations that stipulates that if a property owner of a multi-tenant commercial building comprised of 4 or more tenants undertakes a substantial facade remodel and they don't already have a master sign program in place, they essentially now need to bring that aspect into conformance and apply for a master sign program. I don't have any information on any sign regulations or sign approvals that would have been granted under county jurisdiction.
Okay, so in 2002, when the original master sign program was approved, was the square footage under 150 square feet then? And why wasn't a variance request required then?
I don't happen to have that information, Chair. While we're deliberating and discussing this evening, I could try to find that answer for you.
Okay, and I guess the last question I have is, where did this 150 square foot number come from? Any idea? Or, I mean,
I could only guess that it was considered a reasonable threshold based on the typical size of commercial properties in the city, which is quite small. This one is quite the outlier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I mean, other large properties like this. I think of, Boat Canyon. I think of Village Fair. I mean, and I can't imagine, I mean, is there signage under 150 square feet at either of those locations?
I believe the Village Fair is. It's been a few years since we worked on their master sign program amendment. A lot of their suites face interior areas, and if the signage isn't facing the street, it's actually exempt from sign regulations. So a bit of a different situation, and they also don't have the setback issue. So perhaps they could also get away with somewhat smaller signage, but I believe their application did not exceed 150 square feet.
Okay, that might be the same thing with Bow Canyon. Maybe some of those signs are not considered street facing or so. Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, to the applicant, you have 5 minutes. If you'll give us your name, please.
Tiffany Delgado with Western Sign, and we helped develop the proposed sign program. And thank you, Anthony, for your staff report. It went over everything very well. And the only thing I want to add is that most of the building frontage, you can't even really see unless you're in the actual parking lot of the shopping center. So none of it is really visible from the main highway. And, every tenant should be able to have, at least the 1-to-1 square footage for their suite, unless you're going to be left with tenants with no signs. And I don't think they'd want to lease there if that were the case. So, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions for the applicant?
I've got a kind of a silly one. The monument sign out front, since Gelson's no longer exists there, are you going to remove the Gelson's name from the monument sign?
I'm sure that will come in the
Right.
future, yes. And that's up to the landlord or whoever comes
Okay,
and
okay.
leases a suite. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I
all I
have a
had.
bunch of little questions. I went through the signage plans, and so these relate specifically to the plans. There are 3 categories of tenants. There's the anchor, the major, and then the inline
Mhm.
tenant. Some of those are pretty elaborate signs, like the Hand and Stone is a pretty elaborate sign, and the La Serena is that laser cut, steel sign.
Mhm.
Do those signs meet these requirements? And if they do not, do they need to comply? Therefore, do those signs need to be removed and replaced to meet these new regulations?
I believe as the signs, those tenant signs now, they do meet the new criteria. And the intention is if, one tenant moves out and another one comes in, then they have to comply at that point. I don't think there are any non-conforming signs there right now. Would that be accurate?
I'll confess that I've inherited this project, so I haven't done that research. I can try to find that answer for you as well.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, you can't get out there with a measuring tape.
Oh, I did a lot of pictures and measuring while I was there, but, most of this was, I think, submitted back in 2018 to the city and was never really fully approved, and we kind of just picked up from there. So I'm kind of new to the project as well.
Right. Now, in the sheets at the front of the sign package, there's some detailed information. And one is that the sign needs to be approved by the landlord. So Anthony, these signs don't come to the city. Is that correct? So what we're approving here is a package that allows the landlord to approve based on the criteria in the package.
That is correct, Commissioner Whiten.
Okay.
And that includes signs that with letters exceeding 8 inches. So this is the exception to that Planning Commission review requirement. If it's consistent with a Planning Commission approved master sign program, it would be approved administratively.
There's a line item that says banners are prohibited. And there are a lot, it's not just here in your center, but all over town. Signs have these temporary banners that sure have become permanent. So does that mean no temporary banners?
I mean, we're not applying for any temporary banners, but I know that a couple of the tenants have them now because they're in anticipation waiting for the sign program to be approved. We've been working back and forth for over a year since we applied. So I don't think those tenants particularly wanted to spend any money until, they were certain they can have a certain type of sign.
All right, like Rappaport.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, the color temperature of the LED lights, there's a range that's given And that, I don't know if that's something we want to step into, but the range is given from 2,700 to 6,500, which goes from warm to cold. On other projects, we've conditioned.
Okay,
um,
like the
I don't know.
2,700.
Yeah, you just because it's enough light
Yeah.
and it's warm. So
I mean, we can certainly add that if you'd like.
that's not a big issue for you.
No.
Okay. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, no, one other clarification. On the plan, that there's a plan of the center with the parking lot, and it calls out the kind of sign, a major, an anchor, or an inline.
Mhm.
Starfish is shown with two major tenant signs on the two.
The front and the side.
Yeah. But when you go to the elevations,
Mhm.
the side elevation around the
Okay.
corner from the door, there's no sign shown on that elevation.
Okay, I'll have to.
So, but the intent is to have another sign there. So
Yeah.
they will add a sign. That's the idea?
Well, it's potential for future. I don't know if Starfish will actually want to, but
Okay.
when we did the whole program, we wanted to include everything, not have to make amendments in the future. Say they leave and a new tenant comes, we'd want to have that accessibility or, capability of putting a second sign there.
Are the existing signs remaining, or is this going to be like a Irvine, strip mall where all the signage has to be conforming to a specific letter type and font and all that stuff?
Well, I think the signs that as they stand now are going to stay until that tenant's lease comes up and a new tenant comes in, and then they'll have to conform to the new sign program.
Which
But-
is everything's going to be consistent.
Correct. Yeah, that's
I
why we're developing the sign program now. So they have to stay per those standards. That we're.
It's
approving.
interesting because I think, each tenant would love to have sort of their own stylized sign. It makes it a little more interesting in my book, but it's I guess that's up to the ownership to.
Yeah, well, they're allowed to put up their own fonts and letter styles, and there's still a little bit of wiggle room with the type of wall sign, non-illuminated, internally illuminated. So there's going to be some, character, differences between the different tenants, but
Whatever's there now will remain unless that tenant moves out.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the
Thank you.
intent.
The original signage is supposed to require, some consistency
Right.
to standards, which have just been thrown out the window. So, yeah, this is,
It's a little
that's
outdated.
why,
and I think it
that's why
needs
it's
to
got
be-
that character. Because everybody ignored it.
Tiffany, you had mentioned the landlord is here. One of you gentlemen, the landlord? Oh, are you familiar with the property? We had an
Could you-
application.
Can you come forward to the microphone so that get picked up on the meeting tape?
Right. And so just for the record, the individual said he was the representative of the landlord of the property.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Absolutely.
give us your name, please.
Luke Johnston.
Thank you. We had an application, I think it was last session, in the area of Chase Bank, and I asked a question about restrooms in the facility, and the answer was that there's a public restroom there. I couldn't find it. Is there a
There's-
public?
There's an accessible restroom. It's not made available to the public. So accessible is kind of a tricky way to put it, I suppose. But there was a restroom that was previously utilized by the Chase Bank space. They had two. When we took over the property in 2019, I don't know what deal was struck with the prior landlord, but there had been a corridor that was cut out where there's a storage closet for security and janitorial on site, and then a restroom for their use as well. And so as a component of getting Golden Spoon into the project, we are providing them, they essentially are going to have full access to that, and it'll be utilized primarily for their use of
Okay.
their,
So-
yeah,
So it will be a restroom for their facility, but not for the public.
correct,
Okay. Thank you.
of course.
Great. Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we'll go to a commissioner action. Anybody in particular want to start? Commissioner Dubin?
I'll go ahead. I totally get the need to update this sign program, because I mean, quite a few of the businesses that are in there don't even have signs. So it seems like it was very restrictive. And I agree with your comment that, unless you're in the parking lot, if you're just driving by on Coast Highway, you don't really see any of the signs except for the monument sign out front. So and because, the scale of the center itself is abnormally large for Laguna Beach, I don't see placing the same types of restrictions on other properties that would be a disservice to this one. So I can make the variance findings as well as the CEQA findings, section 15301 and 15311 as well. So I'll be voting in favor.
Commissioner Whiten?
I really can't add anything to that. I support this. I think it's, kind of appalling that you were in the process for so long, but things are changing here. It's not going to take quite as long to get things done. So, yeah, I support it.
Commissioner Goldman?
I support it as well. I actually agree with George's comment about the some differentiation in the signs, that they all don't be, hopefully they don't all become cookie cutter looking exactly the same, that it has a little bit of personality.
And that's certainly not the intent.
Yeah.
We would like some degree of consistency, but more just letting the tenants get some signage that.
Well, just to sort of say something about that, it seemed to me that the consistency was about font size, maximum area.
Reopening the public hearing.
I felt like there was definitely some wiggle room in there. Yeah, it's not going to look like Spectrum.
No.
Okay, closing the public hearing. Commissioner.
Mine was a comment.
You started discussing it with them. Anthony, was there anything you found in your research about the 2002 sign program and why that did not?
Inconclusive, but my strong hunch is that there was no variance required. I believe the city's sign regulations must have changed. The city adopted an ordinance which introduced that restriction, which now requires a variance.
Okay. Well, I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners. I could make the findings for the variance. I'm glad that city staff worked to at least try to make that the other sign standard size, based on the linear frontage. So that's good. And I can, yeah, so I'm willing to approve the project. Somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we adopt a resolution approving sign permit 24-2167 and variance 24-2168 and finding said action exempt from CEQA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Goldman?
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Sadler?
Yes. All right, you are officially approved. 14-day right of appeal to the city council if anybody doesn't agree with that decision.
And don't paint the brick.
Okay, so that concludes our regular items for the evening. Anthony, do you have any other business?
No other business, Chair.
Okay, are there any committee, commissioners, and staff reports?
Not at this time.
Nope.
I have just one announcement, Chair, and that is that the City Council is now accepting applications for two-year terms on the Planning Commission, excuse me. Chair Sadler and Commissioner Goldman, your current terms are set to expire on June 30th. Applications will need to be filed by Friday, May 23rd at 4 p.m. And at this time, we're anticipating that interviews and appointments will be conducted by the City Council on Tuesday, June 10th at 3 p.m.
Thank you, Anthony. And I'm not sure what I'm congratulating you for, but I did notice that you did get recognized as being a valued employee? What was it that you actually got recognized for?
I think it's the Mayor's Award of Excellence.
All right.
Oh,
Well, congratulations on the Mayor's Award of Excellence.
how many
Yeah, well
did you
deserved.
give out, Anthony? Just one?
4, I believe,
And, but in your
And-
department?
and one group award,
Oh, wow.
different departments throughout the city.
Fantastic.
Did you get a crown and a cape or anything to go with that?
I got a very nice proclamation that's
Okay.
framed, and I'll be putting that up in my office.
Good.
Great.
Well,
Congratulations.
well deserved.
Thank you.
Patrick, is there something you'd
I
like
was going
to?
to say, Chair, that was my first day with the city, and it was a pleasure and an honor to be there to honor our illustrious planning
right.
manager. Thank you.
You do, I don't know if people know, will you explain what the new relationship is of your old firm? Where you and Megan?
Correct, sure. So I will be very, very brief, Chair. So previously, the city retained outside services for city attorney services with the firm Best and Krieger. As of for myself, my first day was Wednesday, April 30th. I believe Madam City Attorney's first day was the 28th. I had some other clients. I had to let them know that I will no longer be attending their meetings, as we are now both, along with my colleague Jane Abzug, full-time city employees dedicated solely to the great city of Laguna Beach. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of you. Yeah, that is awesome. Well, the only other thing I was going to add is I just did wander around Main Beach Park the other day, and it's starting to come together. You know, the high green fencing has come down. They still have fencing protecting the lawn areas where they've been new sod has been put in. The new benches, restored benches,
They look great.
they look great. The lighting fixtures, look. Sort of like they tried to duplicate what was originally there.
Whatever they painted them with is pretty awful.
Yeah, I think it's more of a black paint rather than, I think originally kind of our idea or intent was just leaving the patinaed copper or whatever it was, metal, weren't they?
Did they? Well, we were suggesting that they were be made out of copper and just let them age naturally.
Yeah.
And I don't think they used copper because,
No, it looks like it was just done something else and they put just kind of a black paint on it, which
Yeah,
is,
it's
that didn't turn
unfortunate.
out quite the way that we intended, but overall, the orientation of the pathways and the way they line up with the crosswalks and stuff now makes a lot more sense. So, congratulations on the city moving forward on that. And there was a couple of miscellaneous things I was
Yeah,
thinking
the
about. I can't remember what it was.
promenade comes to the city council on May 20th. Is that right? Everyone out there?
and as far as the fire station 4, it's progressing, and I think we're supposed to see another round of updated based on continued input from the subcommittee as well as other stakeholders. So
Great news. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion of adjournment?
I may move we adjourn till our next regular meeting on May 21st, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Goldman,
Yes.
Commissioner Whiten,
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin.
Yes.
Chair Sadler.
Yes, we are officially adjourned. I don't